Hello and welcome to Mission Backlog. So I have knocked another game off my backlog, this time it being Shadow of the Tomb Raider. So I really enjoyed my time with this game. It was actually a bit better than I thought it would be, and yeah, I really enjoyed my playthrough. For me it's got that perfect balance of exploration and action. Just when you've been kind of platforming for a while, you get into some action sequences, and I don't feel they filled the game with too much kind of shooting sequences and stealth sequences. I suppose you could say it's got good pacing to the game. It's a bit darker than the previous two games in the series in terms of tone. Lara goes on quite a journey, and it's also got some kind of horror moments in there as well. Very light, but I'm not much of a horror game player, so I found a few of the moments during the game a little bit jump scary. So I played on normal difficulty, and the entire playthrough took me around 16 hours. So during that time I obviously beat the story, I did a few of the side missions, and I completed a few of the optional tombs as well. If you've played the previous two Tomb Raider games in the kind of rebooted series, then you'll know what to expect. They haven't changed things up too much. There are a couple of new kind of combat moves and stealth options and things that you can do, but on the whole it's a pretty similar game. I would liken it to the progression between the Uncharted games as they go along, so they're pretty much the same game, but there's a few things added in there.
What is all this?
Constellations. This inscription is some sort of riddle. Pink fish.
Pink fish?
Silver-crowned mountain.
So there is a fairly serviceable story in this game. It kind of moves you along, and it gives you kind of an overriding objective that you're kind of working towards, and it all makes sense. It's not the best story ever written, but it's good enough to kind of keep you moving forward. The main thing I'd say about the story is it really does make you question if Lara Croft is actually kind of a good person or not. There's many times during the story when you could certainly argue that she's not, and that she's actually a villain in her own right. I won't spoil too much in terms of that, but I don't know if I like the way they played with that or not. I think I do, and it makes you think about things as you're going through, which is always a good thing. Lara herself goes a bit darker in terms of her mentality during the game as well, which I quite like. I would say that the game is kind of like Tomb Raider crossed with Rambo. There are some moments, certainly in the second half of the game, where Lara Croft goes on a bit of a rampage and becomes a bit of a killing machine. The body count she racks up is not small. She kind of takes out half of South America. But if you're okay with that, and you're happy to not have that kind of too sensible a story, which the Tomb Raiders have never been, to be fair, then I think you'll enjoy the story going through here. It's the typical kind of Tomb Raider story. There's an artifact that she's chasing, and the bad guys are chasing, that can potentially destroy the world, and kind of cause Armageddon. So you're exploring through South America, following clues left by kind of previous hunter explorers, and you're trying to find this artifact before the enemies do. I quite like the setting. So as I say, it's set in South America, it's in Mexico at times, and it kind of ventures into a couple of other places. So it does mean that the majority of the game is set in a jungle. So if you're not a fan of jungle settings, then instantly I'd say this game probably isn't for you, because apart from when you're in tombs or kind of wandering around towns and villages and things, it's nearly all set in jungle settings. Right, so now we come on to the gameplay, which is obviously quite an important element of any game. So I'd say the gameplay in this is pretty decent. As I say, it's very similar to the first two Tomb Raiders in this new trilogy. I don't know if they're making any more, but trilogy at the moment. It's decent. You'll be spending most of your time kind of platforming, kind of scaling cliffs and buildings and that type of thing, and trying to make your way through the environment. or you'll be kind of taking part in some combat. So whether that be stealth combat, which you can do in this game, or just all-out guns blazing kind of gunfights with your enemies. So starting with the traversal, I think it's pretty good. It's fairly easy. It's quite difficult to fall off anything. In fact, very difficult. It doesn't happen often at all. But you'll be climbing, jumping, kind of balancing along things, swinging from vines and trees and kind of limbs and that type of thing. Just generally kind of platforming around the space. There were a few times when I wasn't 100% sure where I was supposed to go, so I spent a few minutes kind of trying to find the correct place and would jump off the side of somewhere where I thought might be the correct way, but it wasn't. But I quite like that. I don't want it to be I don't want to be led by the hand everywhere I go and it be 100% obvious where I'm supposed to be going. And I think that does change depending on the difficulty setting as well. So I played on normal, so there are fairly obvious hints about where you're supposed to go. But as I say, sometimes I couldn't quite spot them. But I'm pretty sure if you up the difficulty that those hints either disappear completely or are far less obvious. So if you did want that kind of more authentic feel where you're going to be dying more in the actual kind of traversal element of the platforming element of the game, then you could up the difficulty, I think, to achieve that. And what I do like actually is they have like a sliding scale difficulty where you can change the difficulty of the platforming but not of the combat. So if you wanted the platforming to be quite difficult, you could up that and keep the combat difficulty low, or vice versa, or just put it all up. But you can kind of pick and choose where you'd like the difficulty to come in the game, which I thought was a really nice touch. So like most games, you'll unlock kind of new equipment and abilities as you go through the game. So there's certain areas that you can't reach kind of first time around because you don't have kind of the necessary climbing equipment and that type of thing. So there's a very, very light element of kind of Metroidvania in the game that you'll need to complete most of the base story before you can access kind of all of the areas, and then obviously you go back through the worlds to access those areas. So there's always something to be working towards. So that's the traversal. In terms of the combat, I thought the combat was really serviceable, actually really fun at times. So you can either kind of go stealthy, kind of sneaking through the reeds. You'll probably have seen, because it was in all of kind of the marketing for the game before it came out and in all the trailers and everything, that you can kind of roll in mud and blend in with kind of the walls and vines and things like that. So that's obviously in the game, so you can pull your enemies kind of into a wall of vines and slit their throat and that type of thing. Or you can go out guns blazing either straight away, or if you get spotted, you obviously kind of go guns blazing, which is often what happened to me, and that's what normally happens to me in pretty much every game I ever play, is that I'll start out trying to be stealthy, I'll get spotted and then go guns blazing, and then halfway or two-thirds through the game I get fed up with trying to go stealthy and I just go guns blazing for the rest of the game. And that is what happened in this one. I just got my shotgun out and I just kind of charged into every combat situation. But it's the stealth element is there if you want to and you have the patience for it. And there are certain points in the game where you have to kind of play stealthily.
Need to search there.
This game's pretty brutal at times. The assassinations you do are quite animated, and there's some pretty brutal ways that Lara takes down her opponents. But also your death animations, if you die, it will always go into kind of like a slow motion kind of little mini cutscene of your death. And there are some truly brutal ones, kind of impaling yourself on spikes. There's one, if I've got footage I'll put it up now, but of me getting eaten by a pack of wolves. Yeah, they haven't held back on the kind of death animations, which is going to be a personal taste of people, but I thought I quite appreciated it. Kind of gave a little bit more weight to your death. In terms of kind of the gun combat, there's not a huge variety of weapons. I'm okay with that because it's not really that type of game, but you'll have an assault rifle / LMG slot, a pistol slot, and a shotgun slot for your guns. And then you also have a bow and arrow. So kind of 4 weapon classes to choose from. And within each of those there'll be different choices that you can either purchase or you'll unlock kind of during your playthrough. So better shotguns, different types of pistols, that type of thing. And none of them feel overly different. Like if I got a new pistol, it didn't feel that different to the pistol I had before. I got an LMG, and yes, it had a larger clip, but it didn't feel that different to fire than the assault rifle I had before. So it's not really a game that focuses too much on the kind of the actual weaponry. But as I say, I don't think it needs to. It's not a first-person shooter or anything. The bow feels really satisfying to use, and there's quite a lot of versatility in the bow itself. You'll use the bow obviously to kind of take down your opponents, and also for hunting, so you can hunt wildlife in this game and use their pelts and skins and things to craft items for yourself. But you'll also use it in solving puzzles, so kind of connecting zip wires between different sections and using it to kind of pull far off objects towards you and that type of thing. So you're using the bow all the time, and I did get quite kind of used to using the bow and found it quite enjoyable throughout the game. You can also have different arrow tips, so you'll have kind of like flame tips, exploding tips, poison tips, that type of thing, which again just gives a little bit of variety, and you'll need to craft those various ammo types and things using resources that you find during your playthrough. So there's items on the floor everywhere actually throughout the entire game. There's so much kind of loot to pick up in this game, but it's mainly crafting resources, nothing too exciting. But you'll pick that up from dead bodies and on the floor in the jungle and things, and from hunting animals, that will allow you to craft different ammo types for your guns as well as your bow and arrow, and upgrade your weapons as well. So you literally just, I can't remember what they call them, kind of crafting scraps or scrap metal, something not very original like it is in most games, and you'll use that to upgrade your weapons. So upgrade the usual things, so like accuracy, damage, reload speed, all of those types of things. So one thing that I did think was a strange choice is that a lot of the kind of combat abilities and stealth abilities and things that you can use, you don't actually get until kind of 2/3 through the game. So, which I thought was a bit of a shame. I'm pretty sure there's some of the combat animations and things they actually show in the trailers of the game that you don't get until quite a long way into the game. It has a positive in a way, because once you get to that stage, Lara does go through kind of like a bit of a moment in the game where she becomes a bit more Rambo, and then that's when you kind of unlock these kind of more savage abilities. So it kind of makes sense from a storytelling perspective, and it does give you that moment in the game where you feel a bit more badass. But it would have been nice to have them earlier in the game, I think. One of the environments they actually use in this game, a lot more so than the previous couple of Tomb Raiders, is water. So there'll be quite a few moments within the story and in the tombs and things where you have to be kind of swimming underwater quite a lot of the time. And they make these kind of quite tense, really, in terms of you'll have limited amount of oxygen and you have to kind of make your way through what is sometimes a bit of a maze of this kind of underwater area, and try and make it through to the side. And on top of that, they'll have predators which you kind of have to hide from as you're going through these water areas. So there's kind of packs of piranhas that will be hunting you if they see you, and also kind of giant electric eels and things which will come and kind of take you down if they see you. So you have this kind of double whammy of trying to stealth your way through these sections, because you can swim through the reeds and things, and waiting for these predators to pass, but also trying to get there before your oxygen runs out. So it can become quite tense, and I thought those were quite a decent addition to the game. They mixed it up from being on land, and they look stunning as well. The actual water effects and everything that they've created looks really good. One of the things that I alluded to kind of in the intro that I kind of really appreciated about this game as well is the kind of the darker tone. So I won't go too much into that in terms of story, so I don't want to spoil anything. But yeah, Lara Croft does kind of become a bit of a Rambo character in this game. She goes off tilt a little bit and starts just kind of murdering everyone. It gets a bit crazy at times. And they also have there's some kind of cutscenes and things that you go through where it's difficult for me to explain without spoiling anything, and I'm not going to spoil anything, so don't worry. but there's some really creepy moments in this game that I kind of really appreciated, and some kind of I'd say horror light, but kind of decent horror moments during this game where you're making your way through these kind of creepy tombs and crypts and things, and there are kind of enemies out there which are pretty scary. So if you are a horror fan, just know that this has got some kind of light horror elements to it that you might find interesting. In terms of what you'll be doing during your kind of playthrough, you're obviously following the main story missions, which you can... It's quite a linear game, but there are... How I'd describe it is individual mini open world segments making up the map, and you can, once you've found bonfires, fast travel between them, so you can backtrack quite easily. But as well as the main missions, there's side missions which you'll get from kind of people you find along the way. You have several kind of villages / towns as base points during your playthrough, so there'll be side missions to tackle in those. And then there'll be obviously, as indicated in the title of the game, there'll be tombs to tackle, which aren't part of the main story, so they're kind of side missions. You'll find them in the open world, and I think there's a decent number of them. I think I've done 4, but I'm pretty sure there's quite a few more, kind of 9 or 10 or so. So there's quite a lot of time to tackle them, and those are all really fun. Every one I did was quite different, had some kind of different, they're mainly puzzle based, not so much combat, but every one I've done had quite in-depth puzzle solving in there, and each one took me about half an hour to kind of 45 minutes to beat. I didn't get stuck too long on any of them, kind of a few minutes on each section of kind of the puzzles, but just enough to make you use your brain. You can't just kind of sail through them, and I'm sure there are some that are probably would keep me stuck for a bit longer than that. So they're definitely worth doing, and I enjoyed my time with them, and they will unlock there's some perks which I'll get onto in a second, but there's some perks and I think some weapons or clothing and things that you can only get from these tombs, so they're worthwhile doing if you want to have all the perks and equipment and things during your playthrough. There's also kind of, as you'd expect, collectibles dotted around, which I can't see any other use for than just being collectibles. Most of them are kind of like historical artifacts that it gives you a bit of a kind of narration about, and is just kind of that subtle world building, which I do appreciate, but I wasn't going to go kind of too much out of my way to find these things. And as I was just mentioning, the perk system, it's quite extensive in terms of there's quite a few perks you can unlock in the skill tree, though I did find it quite underwhelming in terms of I've got right to the edge of the skill tree where you'd expect there to be kind of like huge game changing perks and things to kind of change up how you play or make you feel a bit more powerful, but so far I haven't unlocked anything that is game changing. Everything's just kind of very small incremental things that none of them really affect how you play the game. None of them add that much, in my opinion, an enjoyment to the game. They're all just kind of just kind of tiny changes, like you can carry a little bit more ammunition, or you don't need to kind of press X when you're jumping to a ledge and things like that. Nothing kind of game changing. And it does require multiple playthroughs if you want to unlock everything in the perk tree. I've just done the one playthrough, and I've kind of been focusing mainly on one of the sections, and I still haven't unlocked everything in that section. And you would need to do, as I say, all of the tombs if you wanted to unlock everything.
You think he's good down there?
Right, so in terms of graphics, this game looks stunning. I played on the Xbox Series X, and it looks good throughout. When you're in the jungle sections, when you're in the tombs, the environment design is really, really good. The graphical fidelity looks great. The frame rates remain solid throughout, and they've done just a really good job of building that kind of that atmosphere depending on what environment you're in. The actual kind of level design has been really well done. The lighting, especially in the tombs, is kind of incredible. They've made a great use of kind of shadows and dark areas to make kind of areas seem a bit creepy. Just all round I really enjoyed my time kind of making my way through this game. There's a lot of moments where I just stopped and kind of took in the view. I took a lot of screenshots playing through this game. Yeah, it's a good looking game, and it plays. It's pretty well optimized for the Xbox Series X. I imagine it is on PC and other platforms as well. But yeah, I didn't experience, to my memory, any kind of frame rate drops or anything. It played pretty smoothly, and I didn't have a single crash in my entire playthrough, and I don't even remember any kind of just minor bugs or anything. There's certainly none that I remember, so definitely none that kind of like took me out of the moment or spoiled anything for me. So it's a pretty well optimized game, which you would expect considering it's a fair few years old now. But I wouldn't say that that's anything to worry about. I'm pretty sure you can be confident that it's going to run pretty smoothly for you and look great on anything of equivalent power of the Series X. The sound design is really good, especially in, as I said, some of those creepier temple locations. It really does feel like a horror game at times, to me anyway. And if you've got headphones on, they've got great use of directional sound, which kind of puts you on edge a lot of the time. And then when you're in the jungle, they've got all the kind of, as you would expect, kind of jungle sound effects of wildlife and rain and that type of thing. It's all done really, really well, and kind of just adds that extra layer to that world building. The voice acting I thought was decent as well. I really like, I should probably look up her name, but I really like the voice actor that plays Lara Croft. I think she did a decent job.
I love old maps. When I was a little girl, they always led to treasure.
They always make me feel more lost.
My name's Lara, by the way.
Pilar, you don't look like the type of tourists we usually get.
I'm an archaeologist, actually.
Though the only thing I would say with that I thought could be improved was when she's narrating, whenever you find a historical artifact or an object, there's text on the screen, but she'll kind of narrate it. And I think this is done deliberately, but it's quite monotonous. It would be good if she put kind of a bit more influx in there, a bit more kind of interest in when she's kind of talking through it. But apart from that, I thought it was all really good. And the rest of the cast of characters, there was nothing I noticed that where I thought, oh, that's kind of bad voice acting. It's all pretty decent. Never took me out of the story or anything, which is the only thing I'm really looking for in this type of game.
We can't let Trinity get hold of this.
Let's think this through.
Do you realize the tragedy you have unleashed? The cleansing has begun. It falls to me now to stop it before it consumes us all.
What have I done?
Right then, so to wrap things up, I had, as you might be able to tell, a really good time with this game, and it exceeded my expectations in a lot of ways. I loved the setting, I loved the darker tone they decided to go with, and I thought the combat was really satisfying, and I looked forward to the platforming sections, which didn't outstay their welcome. So I guess you could say that there's some good pacing throughout the game. And I'm thinking of doing another playthrough, which I don't often do with these kind of linear storyline games, but I would like to see what the game plays like on the hardest setting, and there's quite a few kind of side missions and tombs and things that I haven't done yet, which I kind of want to see, especially the tombs. So I'm going to give Shadow of the Tomb Raider an 8 out of 10, so it's a solid game. And I think if you liked previous entries, if you've played any of the previous two Tomb Raiders, or if you've played any of the Uncharted games, because this is very similar to them in terms of gameplay, then I think you'll enjoy the game. So yeah, definitely worth a playthrough, and recommended. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider dropping a like and subscribing. And I hope you all have a great day. Now on to the next one.